Hello, everybody. It's Friday, and welcome to the Friday edition of Moohead Radio. I'm your host, the big and furry bovine. Joining me today on the program is Derek Frisbee of DF Sports. We've got a full roster of things to talk about, including this news that I'm sure Derek is going to be talking about a lot and has already regarding the Big Ten. Joining our stream is T-Tosh. Hi, T-Tosh. How you doing, buddy? And Derek, you're with us?
Yep. T-Tosh is muted. I can't hear T-Tosh, but I see him.
He's getting his shit together now. And everything rolling okay on YouTube?
Yeah. Yep. Everything's coming through fine.
Good. I had a little problem getting the stream started, and I still am not aware why. But we're all good and all clear on the Western Front. But there's so many things to talk about. I like to start with the breaking news, only because this is stuff that if you aren't sitting around reading it, the Cavaliers have reached a 3-year, $18 million deal to bring back Ricky Rubio. According to sources, there is no guarantee that Rubio will be ready to start the season. However, at some point during the season, they are hopeful that he will add what he added to the team last year, which was veteran leadership. And he really did a magnificent job before he tore the ACL. They've also agreed to a 1-year deal with Robin Lopez, the lesser of the two Lopez's, and that's from Woj, so it's a reliable, although pedantic source, SAT word. And Robin Lopez will be a backup center behind Jarrett Allen. So that's kind of good news for the Cavaliers, and we're doing something. And then a third thing, that the Cavaliers have signed yet another point guard in Raul Neto from the Wizards most recently, 30 years old. And it's the organization's belief that last year took its toll physically on Darius Garland, and that they want to be able to keep him spry and energetic through the duration of the season, no matter how far it goes on for the team. And Neto is a guy who has been around the leagues for several years and is not a good three-point shooter. He is a floor general. He's a great locker room guy. He figures to be the third string point guard as soon as Ricky Rubio is healthy enough to come back from the ACL, which I know they're not going to be rushing Ricky back, mainly because this is his second ACL tear, and nobody wants to see a third. So that's big news on the Cavaliers front. Well, I like to follow up on stories that I shake my head about. The Ravens' Jalen Ferguson died from a combined effect of fentanyl and cocaine. That would be known as a speedball, folks. Jalen Ferguson, 26 years old, of the Baltimore Ravens. We talked about this a week ago and brought up the real possibility of illicit drugs, and that the toxicology would tell the story. And sure enough, it did. They ruled this an accident, but this is no accident, folks. When you combine, if you don't learn from John Belushi, then you don't learn. And more recently, Chris Farley, they both died the same way, which is combining the speed element of cocaine with the painkiller downer kind of thing that fentanyl provides. Fentanyl is an incredibly powerful painkiller, and is utilized in injections after knee replacement surgery. I mean, there's all kinds of uses for fentanyl as a painkiller for cancer patients in the form of patches. that disseminates a certain amount of fentanyl into the blood. And this is a sad story. And who knows? We'll never know when this started, how this starts. Playing professional football, though, is demanding physically, and painkillers are nothing new. USC, UCLA moving from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. We're going to let Derek riff on that a little later in the show because he's the most knowledgeable guy in the room. We got as far as some of the whys, what fors, and what it means. Some other real fast news. The Minnesota Timberwolves are acquiring Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz, but they gave up their souls, or what's left of their souls, to get him. 4 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert.
Unbelievable.
The Timberwolves will also send Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Jared Vanderbilt, and Leandro Balmaro, number 22 pick Walker Kessler, and 4 first-round picks to the Jazz. I mean, that's crazy shit. I mean, and Rudy Gobert is a wonderful defensive player, but you got to wonder, the Wolves have agreed to a $224 million Supermax deal with Karl Anthony Towns, who didn't really appear down the stretch to be all that into it, to tell you the truth. This is just bringing in a big name and overpaying. And this is the story of the NBA, not just the NFL. Andre Drummond, yes, that Andre Drummond, 2-year, $6.6 million deal with the Chicago Bulls. And the Bulls re-signed, now I don't have this story yet because the guy who was their leading scorer and I want to say that he used to play in I'm losing his name completely, but the Chicago Bulls are bringing him back, but they're bringing Andre Drummond in. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Andre Drummond is one of the worst attitude players that I've ever witnessed, both with the Pistons and with the Cavaliers. Sorry stuff. The Phoenix Suns and Devin Booker agreeing on another $224 Supermax deal. I mean, we talk about $230 million for Deshaun Watson, and I know it's guaranteed, but these guys are making this kind of money in the NBA. Now, it's not all guaranteed money, but if you want to take it to an extreme, the Nuggets signed Nikola Jokic for a 5-year, $270 million deal. So, once again, and then the news that's hanging over the NBA is the fact that Kyrie Irving and now Kevin Durant wants out of New Jersey, and that Harden wants out of Philadelphia, and who knows what might happen next. God.
Hey, Lou,
Go ahead.
I don't know if you saw it today, but there was some other news as far as contract extensions today. The one that surprised me and kind of blew my mind when I woke up and saw this, the New Orleans Pelicans have extended Zion Williamson on a massive, I believe it was a max extension or whatever.
I saw that too. It was 5 years. The guy never plays.
To me, the only explanation I have for why they would do this is that they are terrified that Zion would go to another team and become LeBron 2.0 that everybody was talking about. And then it comes back to them and say, well, you drafted that guy and you let him walk out the door. Outside of that, this makes zero sense.
Well, do you think that they're trying to justify their pick and why they picked him in the first place? Maybe the fan base, they want to ensure that this guy's healthy. He's on a comeback. He lost some weight. Looks good in the previous video footage on his dunking skills, his footwork and everything. He lost some weight, obviously. So maybe they're saying, okay, well, if this guy's fully committed, we're all in on it. They have to defend the pick, right?
I understand that kind of thinking, but the scary part of it is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because there is a 50% chance that he's going to re-injure the foot because we know that players are never the same once their feet go. It's like knees, but feet are like Zydrunas Ilgauskas. Feet will limit what you can do. Go ahead, Stephen.
No, I was just going to say, when I looked at that deal, I actually compared that to the Johnny Manziel ordeal with the Browns. The owner was all in on him. Obviously, the front office was. They had to justify why they picked him, even though the fans were starting to turn away from it, from the one or few two highlights that he was given. So they were trying to justify the pick, and I feel like and I know it's two separate circumstances. One is with health. One is related to off the field issues with alcoholism and partying and little cocaine here and there. But I compare these two stories as almost similar, very similar. And I think Zion with this, I'm shocked that they gave him such a large contract like that.
Yep.
But I think when they saw his recent turnaround, I think that they're just giving reassurance to their fans that they're all in on this guy. They're behind him. They believe in him. And we actually believe we're going to get something out of him. Plus, he's still, 22 years old, somewhere around there. So they still have some time for him. It would be different if he was 28 or 29. But, at 22, he's still got some time. And, he's still got he's still got time on his hands. So I think New Orleans is going all in on him. And I think only time can tell if within a year or so if they're going to end up, sticking their foot in their mouth. I guess only time can tell.
Well,
I also want to add that
Sure.
that us being Cleveland fans, one thing about the NBA, in my opinion, that it's run by the big markets in LA and New York and the Celtics and stuff like that. So when you're in like New Orleans, Cleveland, Oklahoma City, I think it's harder to get free agent agents to come to your city. So when you have a guy like Zion, who, yes, he's been out for a while, but when we last saw him on the court, he was 60% from the 2-point, which is as effective as a 40% from the 3. So I think they're just thinking about keeping him there in a market that doesn't usually get people to come.
Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
But that's the problem when you're dealing with the Pelicans, is that it's a losing organization. That was supposed to be the big deal, and that they were getting Zion Williamson, and then Zion ends up getting hurt, and he never plays any duration of time whatsoever, and the team continues to blow, and now they have to shit or get off the pot, and they have, in essence, gone all the way in. I don't look at this any different than I look at the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves, along with the 76ers, when they had the process in Philadelphia, meanwhile in Minnesota, bringing in Karl Anthony Towns, and then they had Wiggins, and they had a bunch of players that were supposed to be an assemblage that was going to get them into a deep playoff run, and it doesn't happen. And now they got, is his name Edwards, the guy who was their leading scorer, and he's a fine young scorer. And now they're saying, well, we got to bring in a defensive-minded center like Rudy Gobert, and they give away 4 first-round draft picks. They're never going to be able to surround these players. It's just a very difficult chore to bring a dead franchise to life, is what it amounts to.
But I still feel like Utah won this long term. They needed to rebuild. It was going to come to that point, if not this year, next year. Why not just get rid of Gobert and even Donovan Mitchell and just try to rack up on picks? That's the same thing we did with James Harden. That's the same thing the Nets are going to do right now. So, I mean, it only makes sense to prepare for the future. And I just think that Utah's just going to have a bunch of second-tier role players like a Patrick Beverly and stuff like that. They're not going to have any, top-tier superstars there. So they're not a destination, like Double P said, that's going to attract a superstar. So they might as well just acquire picks. And I think that they won this trade long-term, and the Timberwolves won this short-term. Obviously, they're going to have, a mini version of the 2.0 Twin Towers, but I don't think it's going to be enough to get them over the hump.
No, I mean, and it's desperation.
Yeah.
And it would be a lie to say that what the Browns did wasn't from a source of desperation. Looking at the Bengals having a franchise quarterback now, and how long the Ravens quarterback will be a franchise quarterback for the Ravens, nobody yet knows. But when you're surrounded in your own division by teams, it puts a flame to your feet, and you get some of that desperation. And some of these
conference
moves,
too.
I'm sorry?
Too. You have. I'm saying you got to look at the conference as well. When you have Josh Allen and the Bills, Mahomes is still going to do what he's doing. I mean, teams are just building and building because they know what the AFC is. Look at Denver now. The same thing with Denver. You go out and you trade for Russell Wilson. So, yeah, it was absolutely desperation. And the Browns, we're a roster that's built. It's you got to do what you got to do.
And Mr. Moulay, not to go back to basketball, but if the Jazz were able to maximize their potential, I don't think Gobert is worth 4 first-round draft picks or whatever. I think they got 4 future. But to get what they got for Gobert, imagine what they can get for Donovan Mitchell if they can find the right suitor. Just imagine.
Yeah, and it would be a great fit for Donovan Mitchell. Would be the Cavaliers. It's not going to happen. The Cavaliers have spent all but $1 million of their available funds. They got to bring Colin Sexton back.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the Cavs team that we're going to run with. So that's that. What we have to hope is that, Evan Mobley comes back stronger, more physically ready for the grind of a full season and maybe thereafter. That Jared Allen can keep up his motivation because the problem we have in Cleveland is that Evan Mobley, we brought his brother on board to keep him hungry and to keep him pressing hard because Evan Mobley's kind of a laid-back guy. And so is Jared Allen. And Jared Allen has asked the coaches to coach him hard because he knows that his own tendency is to kind of fall back. And that's why you would see these games where he would just disappear, and when they get on him and push him, he would have, very strong, dominant performances. We need that every day. We don't have the superstars in Cleveland. We need that kind of effort every night from our basketball players. And you saw how much the glue that Rubio was to the team, how much that held the team together because it really didn't look like the same team after Rubio went down with the ACL. So they're hoping by bringing him back for 3 years, they can refine some of that magic and that chemistry that he has and be able to maybe utilize Colin Sexton in a way that makes him a scorer off the bench, takes the heat off Darius Garland so that he doesn't feel like he has to be the scorer, that he has to be the defensive presence and a rebounder. It was too much on him. Point guard, everything, scoring, everything being one guy's shoulders. But what I want to talk about really primarily, at least initially, before we get to the talk of the Big Ten, I have been really knocking Rich Eisen from the Peacock Network, former ESPN guy, who, along with Mike Florio of PFT, for being the two most hateful, obnoxious people about the Deshaun Watson story. And there are a number of others who I don't watch, but these two really stepped out and went way out of their way. And it was obvious that they, having watched Rich Eisen before, I've never seen him like that before, but he's basically a slave to the NFL. The NFL really made these guys feel like they got big dicks walking around in a room by coming off and saying abominable things about Deshaun Watson. And you don't even have to try hard to shake your head and say, man, Deshaun Watson has a problem. But to grind it in and to be saying that he deserves an indefinite suspension or Trevor Bauer-esque, or in some cases from crazy people, he should never play again, and all the goofiness. And now all of a sudden, they're changing their tune.
Yep.
And I am not stupid. I know when the tide changes direction, when it's going out to sea and when it's coming into land. And here's what I think. A couple days ago, Mike Florio starts with the horseshit of, well, the NFL might give a little bit on something. And of course, they slap that down right away. No, we're holding firm with this indefinite thing, with the minimum 1 year thing, and he'll definitely miss all of 2022, which still wouldn't surprise me. But the tone of it was somewhat less certain. The people I speak with and the reading that I do are telling me that the NFL ownership group is not all on the same base regarding this. And that's an interesting way of looking at this. The NFLPA is just looking for something that they consider to be fair. The NFL as a body wants to come down hard on Deshaun Watson for public relations reasons.
Yep.
But the ownership group seems to have some questions and some doubts and some fears. And as a businessman, I want to try to explain what I think those issues are. The word unprecedented has come up twice. One was the $230 million guaranteed contract for Deshaun Watson. That was an unprecedented contract in the NFL. And that contract caused a ripple and a wave to run through the ownership of professional football, and that the teams were pissed off at the Browns for beating them to the punch. But be that as it may, they got upset about that because it was unprecedented, and how dare a rinky-dink organization like the Browns be the ones to open Pandora's box. That's the first time the word unprecedented came up. The second time the word came up was in reference to a potential unprecedented suspension of Deshaun Watson. Now, unprecedented is an interesting word without precedent, never been done before. And are you sure you want to choose this situation to set a precedent? In the case of the Browns, they didn't feel that Baker Mayfield was going to be the guy, and Jimmy Haslam's buck wild, half-assed crazy. All right? You put those things together, and yes, you have, as Mussolini would say, abject desperation. There you go. The desperation, the Hail Mary contract. You know, even Keith is saying, is he had a psychiatric evaluation? He's going to have to do more than just talk to people within the Browns organization. I mean, believe me, by the time this is done, he's going to have full-out counseling, and he's going to have to attend whatever he has to attend, and he's going to have to...
Well, they should force him to. It really, to be honest, I mean, I know he's come out and he said, well, I don't have a problem. Why would I do that? Well, it's fine if you don't think you have a problem. But at the end of the day, you're working for the NFL. You're working for the Cleveland Browns. If they view that you have a problem, then you need to get it handled, whether if you like it or not. It's not your choice.
Yeah.
But I think he does have to do it, because in the end, I don't know that he can ever clear his name completely over this. Yeah. But there are other parts of this thing that are kind of falling apart at the seams. And part of it was when 20 out of 24 people just took the money and ran. And then there were 4. And one of those women were utilized to sue the Texans. And that story is, this is going to be, well, that's what I'm thinking. If this is unprecedented territory and the suspension of Deshaun Watson were to be 1 or 2 years from playing football, is this the case is this the Ray Rice case that you blew so many years ago?
Oh,
Is this the thing that you're going to regret if you don't do it now? It's all public relations. And my question is, what do the NFL owners know about the players on their own teams?
Yep, exactly.
I mean, do you think the Ravens are like, wow, fentanyl and cocaine, Jalen Ferguson? We had no idea. Come on, get clean. You wanted him to get clean, probably. Well, you got to get clean yourself and be honest about this shit.
That is true.
The teams know if they got guys who are doing some pretty fucked up things. And let me tell you something. We've already seen Dwayne Haskins walk into traffic and get killed because he was fucked up on alcohol and with another woman, and God only knows why at 6 o'clock in the morning after having, partied the whole night and got into a fight earlier. His life ended. We've been watching stories and say, and all these people can't be, they're the greatest people in the world. We want to remember Jalen Ferguson as the great citizen he was. He's a fucking drug addict. I mean, the guy was medicating himself for whatever goddamn reason. And the team, nobody questions the Ravens organization about Jalen Ferguson. It's like they have team physicians, You can look at somebody's behavior, and if they're fucking speedballing, you're going to know it.
And Mr. Rue, said thing, if you have friends, like you'll know a friend who's suffering from depression. You may have a friend who's suffering from drug abuse or alcohol abuse or whatever. And I'm not saying you may not know every little thing about them because you're not in their head 24 hours, but you can get some of the basics, even with your basic friends and relationships you have amongst your family or et cetera. So you can't tell me in a locker room they don't know things like this. I've sat in a locker room where I've seen guys ordering up PEDs, performance enhancing drugs, and said it'll increase your speed and this, and this. And I would hear them just talk about it like locker room talk, like it was no big deal.
Yep.
And you're getting to the point I was going to bring up. Just like in the 90s, the baseball owners knew about all the steroid guys. Like Sosa. They knew all about that. So obviously, I think the league, the NFL, they know about this stuff.
It's like even wrestling. Vince and all them knew about steroids and all these wrestlers dying before 35, and they have like a long list of 100 guys. And then now they're like, we're going to go after it. We're going to hit it with an iron stick, PED, drug test, and this. But they've already known that this was going on for.
Well, the funny thing about the WWE is an example of this type of thing is that the bigger is better, crazy Ultimate Warrior days.
Yeah.
When
Incredible Hulk, yeah.
When the steroids were just out of control, Major League Baseball, where Mark McGuire looked like three men, and something from a comic book, and
Bond,
Dr. David Banner,
Roger Clemens too. He was 40 years old, and I remember when he came back
lost
to the
his
Astros,
fastball. Remember, he lost his fastball, then suddenly he came back and regained it.
The guy was short and stubby. He retired, came back for the Astros, only played road games, and was completely swole up again. He said, I'm just basically working out. I'm like, dude, you're like 45. There's no way you have a body of a 20-year-old guy. You're on something. And then that's when Pettit, snitched on him and all that in the whole trial. And he said, look, dude, I'm just admitting it. We all took steroids. I mean, I admitted it at least.
I saw Jim Thome come into the league, right? And look, I know he's revered. They built a statue for him in Cleveland and all of that good stuff. But he came up for the minor leagues when he first came up from Akron. And he was a skinny, gap-hitting, 300, great bat, really good, solid third baseman who just turned into the Incredible Hulk. I mean, he did to his body what Josh Naylor does through food, he did through steroids, except it was muscle.
Facts.
And so he started hitting 450-foot home runs. All right. And they always gave him a green light on 3-0 because they knew even if he hit it to the opposite field, it would leave the Jake. They knew that. So what do the NFL teams know about their own players? Probably more than you and I and anyone else could ever know. But think of it this way. Before I lose my train of thought.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Think of it this way. You have an owner who ran a snow plow across a field in 1982 to win a football game and take it away from the Miami Dolphins, done by a guy who was on furlough from prison sentence. All right. And the same guy who got the hand job in the slave sex shop, the same guy who got the Tuck rule to defend him, the same guy whose head coach spied on other teams' practices by filming their practices. I mean, if this is the basic way these people are, and this is the morality that they're working in, I mean, I find it just preposterous when Rich Eisen would say about Deshaun Watson, that it's vile behavior. And it's like, what I think is vile behavior is when players are dying in front of you and you're doing nothing because you're allowing them to take painkillers. What the WWE did, they just replaced the steroids. These guys don't need to be big, and we'll just turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to their utilizing painkillers. And so all of them were drinking too much, we're taking pain pills, and you look at guys like Randy Macho Man Savage all the way down, and all the people who've died. And
Jake the Snake, if you want to hear anything on this story, go listen to Jake the Snake's documentary and stuff like that of his experience. He's lucky to be alive, but if you want to hear what they all went through, go listen to him.
I mean, so it wasn't about steroids for the WWE. It was about how can we get these guys on the road 300 nights a year and their bodies will hold up from being slammed to the ground and on hard surfaces outside of the ring. How are we going to do that? And there's going to be an occasional fatality when a guy falls out of a cherry picker onto a turnbuckle and is crushed to death in his chest in front of everybody at WrestleMania. So, and somehow they never seem to be held responsible and accountable. Same thing with the NFL.
Well,
so the NFL owners are like, we're pretty lucky guys because our players die on average when they're 57 years of age. Their lives are crippled and screwed up. Mm-hmm. And for the one who goes on and has a really nice career, there's 20 who we never talk about anymore because they're really fucked up. We've got it pretty good because we sit back here safely and we're the owners of a franchise, and man, it's nothing but money. Every year the media rights for this go up, and we're going to have a massive one after next year once DirecTV is pushed out of the NFL negotiations, and Amazon and the big boys and Apple and all of them are going to come to play. There's going to be serious, even more serious coin on the line. These people want to protect what they have. Mm-hmm. And the crazy part of it is, do they want a guy like Deshaun Watson, who has this kind of a problem, to bring down everything they have by putting out unprecedented punishment when time will tell what they knew? You know what? What? It's you're hitting the nail on the head there. And, I've heard information, and I'm not going to say everything, but I can tell you this much. The NFL is absolutely terrified with this, and it's not a coincidence that the narratives are starting to change media-wise, because what you just said, the NFL is going to protect the shield. Yes. And this whole Deshaun Watson situation is really starting to backfire on the NFL, because originally, like I've talked about, they were using Deshaun Watson as the poster boy of the shit that's happening with the NFL, and they're hiding Snyder and they're hiding Flores and all this stuff behind Deshaun. And now all the other stuff is starting to seep out and it's starting to become public. And now the Deshaun stuff has taken a turn for the NFL to where now the Texans are being involved. And how much did they know? I could tell you this much. Get pissed at me all you want, people, whoever listen to this. Deshaun Watson is going to get a lot less games than you think, and it's going to be because of all of this. And it's going to be because the NFL Players Association is going to actively threaten the NFL with all of this, and the NFL is going to respond with Deshaun Watson as a way to protect the shield. And plus, keep this in mind, sorry, Steven, just this is the last point.
what they're probably going to do, this is my prediction, they're going to make Deshaun Watson pay the $10 million he got for sitting out last year, and they're going to say, well, we're factoring that is in as a part of the suspension, and then they're going to give him, my prediction, I'm going to say less than 8 games. And then they're going to say, oh, well, all this stuff. And they're going to use those excuses. And they're going to try to make themselves look good. But at the end of the day, it's exactly what you said. It's about protecting the shield and not bringing everything down.
But also by protecting the shield, that also mean that they may have to go by public opinion and have to go with the Me Too movement and all those crazy people out there that are going to say, wait a minute, you're letting this guy play. So, and this thing could be dragged out another 2 or 3 years. Who knows? We have no idea how this is. Court cases could last 5 years for all we know. This thing could get dragged out another 2 or 3 years, which is another reason why the Texans were forced to trade this guy, because it's like he's sitting on a large contract. He's not going to be able to play. We got to get rid of him, and we were able, to talk.
He didn't want to be there either.
Little Jimmy, but it could be an opposite effect. What I'm fearing is if the NFL jumps on board and says he's suspended 1 year, right? A year goes by and these court cases continue with the rescheduling, and more women come forward. A whole year comes up. We're right back here next summer talking about what happens next. He can't play. What the NFL dropped the ball in making it a year. So what do? You extend it another year? What happens then? So really, we're in a position now, and I'm gonna go ahead and let Moo take over, where it's so unpredictable. We don't know what move the court case is going to go, let alone for the NFL and for us to even render what's going to happen next. And that's the scary part.
The scary part to me, and somebody's in the chat room who obviously has a different opinion than I. And Renee, I'm more than happy to anything you want to point out, because my concern about all of this is that none of this has anything to do with justice.
Oh,
I don't see anybody, if this were a just situation, then the people who were truly harmed, the women who were truly harmed, have to get justice for what Deshaun Watson did. And look, if Deshaun Watson whipped his dick out and thrust it into somebody's hands, that's unacceptable behavior.
Thanks.
In 2022, in 2010, in 2000, in 1964, it's just not acceptable behavior. We have to come up with an understanding without, as a society, saying we should give him the same penalty as a rapist. I mean, we have to have some basis for distributing justice. The problem here is that a business and multiple businesses, Deshaun Watson's $230 million business, the Texans, football operations business, the Browns operations, the NFL's operations, and justice is getting lost, getting lost in the shuffle.
So, Mr. Moo had a question.
Yes.
Do you think that Deshaun Watson and his lawyer, and I wish your lawyer friend would have been on here from the other, previous month you interviewed him. This would have been a good question to ask him. Do you think it's possible the judge can put a deadline as to when women can come forward? Because a year from now, another 5 can come forward. Will he put a deadline on there and just say, okay, you have till October 15th to render all the cases that you can, because after that I'm capping it and we're going forward? Or do you think this could still drag on?
Yeah, I don't think you can do that.
I mean, is there a statute of limitation? Is there a law?
He can say that he's got X number of people lined up. The problem is that he's going to try to keep this alive with about only 80, with 82% of his clients having already settled with 4 women. And if one of them he's utilizing to step up for the purpose of suing the Houston Texans, and the Texans, look, I have no doubt that there are people within the organization who damn well knew what Deshaun Watson was doing. I have no doubt about that. All right. So it doesn't take much to convince me. The problem is the guy who ultimately sits behind the big chair will say, fire him, fire him, fire her, fire
Damage
him.
control.
And the story won't get out, and we'll just suffocate this thing, snuff it out in the crib. That's what these folks do. It has nothing to do with justice. It has to do with damage control.
Yeah.
So,
Mr.
go ahead.
And the thing also is, I just think another thing that's kind of been forgotten is that this whole thing has kind of turned into just a bad game of telephone, to where people are, we already talked about a little bit, but like, oh, he's a rapist and he's this and that. But after the case yesterday, they said there was no evidence of, let me read the tweet real quick, of violence, threat, force, or coercion by Deshaun Watson. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it moves on going forward, because obviously he did something, but I don't think it's so bad like, oh, he needs a year and this and that.
Well, I'll tell you what the most damaging things are. The woman who brought the lawsuit against the Texans, and make no mistake, it's Tony Busby doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Because he wants his 33%.
Yeah.
Like the name that he chose to use, Toy Garner, who is from the greater Houston area, I just looked her up on Instagram, and I looked her up on the internet, and everybody knows who Toy Garner is if you just look it up. She is not a massage therapist. She was a student at a massage school, never graduated, has no diploma whatsoever, no credentials.
No license.
No license. She left the practice. She became a stewardess, a flight attendant.
Absolutely.
All right. And she was advertising massage services on Instagram. So right off the bat, you take a step backwards.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a response from Renee, and I really want this. So I can accuse anyone, but proving it in court is the key. Two owners of other teams should be held to a higher level of accountability. I'm in the Me Too movement. And you know something, Renee? I am a huge supporter of women's rights. I think violence against women is one of the most disturbing things. You saw what happened in Hollywood, and that's really what kind of coalesced the Me Too movement. I think there are some people who were within the Me Too movement, like Rose McGowan, who were unfortunately looking for more self-publicity than the cause.
Oh, okay.
Anything that subjects women to violence, unacceptable and needs to be punished to the highest degree.
I agree.
And I am not saying that Deshaun Watson deserves to walk away scot-free. But what I'm saying is everybody who helped him get to the spot where he is, who knew about this, has some part in this whole process. And all of them don't want to accept responsibility. And the higher you go up the food chain, the fewer people want to take responsibility. So I can appreciate where you're coming from, and proving it in court is the only thing with a civil suit, Renee. In order to win the case, you win money. 20 out of 24 women were willing to settle the case because they felt, for whatever reason, less empowered to do what the other 4 have done.
Okay, so 4 women are still pursuing it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so see, I didn't know that. So 20 of them are already clean slate. That's it, under the rug. It's over.
Yeah, well, and you're never going to find out what they were paid either. That's just
that's part of the gag order. But okay, so 4 of them are still actively pursuing him.
Yes.
So we're at that point. Okay. So
and one of them is a name of Toy Garner, whose name was brought into this specifically for the Houston Texans. That was the name that was leveraged for Tony Busby's purposes. And you know something, Renee? If you're really looking at a whole slew of bad guys, look no further than the attorney who's representing the women. This is an exploitation of a different type. And to me, this is a mess. And when people if you look at Tony Busby's background, it's very, very problematic. And he has done many dishonest things in his life. And this is a money grab from Tony Busby. And if there are 4 women who seriously were wounded, injured, whose careers were damaged, I'm all for in civil court, get as much money as they can, because there's no criminal case. We're not going to put him in jail, but make him pay. I'm all for that. The problem is the NFL has a problem on his hands because the teams involved knew what was going on. And there's more to the story than just this one guy. There's a whole lifestyle of NFL players who are living the nightlife, who have social influencers who are following them around in an entourage. And you keep wondering why these assault cases keep coming up amongst football players. Start, with the Ray Rice slugging a woman and Kareem Hunt kicking a woman on the ground. You wonder, well, how can men do that to women? And it's like, these are men who play a violent game, who are hepped up. They're taking painkillers in many cases to keep themselves able to continue to play long enough before they die of brain damage.
Gotcha.
And this is a huge problem. And the case is going to be settled by money, but it's not going to do anything to stop these men from abusing women. And that has to happen in a criminal court. That's where the hangup is.
And the other tough thing too is that the NFL is struggling right now is even if Deshaun's innocent or guilty or whatever, he has the 24 accusations. So if something comes down the line, they don't want to set a precedent of, oh, we were too lightly on a guy who had this much going on. And then they also have to juggle the fact that the owners, Jerry Jones, who've had problem with a bunch of ladies in the past. I just found out earlier this week about something he did like 10 years ago with a stripper, which he paid her and then he grabbed her in an area that I won't mention. And he was paying her money not to say anything. And then we obviously know about Robert Kraft. And what did the NFL do? They didn't give him no games, which is what the NFLPA is arguing right now. So they're juggling the fact that they didn't give the owners any punishment, but they don't want to set a precedent for the player right now with the ongoing cases of not giving him a punishment. So they're juggling that also.
And Renee, I couldn't agree with you more. The people who are at the top of the food chain, and that includes the people in the NFL, the commissioner who was hired by 32 owners. It isn't the 2 owners. It's 32 owners. You see, and this is what the NFL, this is damage control. I mean, because if 2 owners come up and can't pay their way out of this deal, and they actually got tried and the publicity came out, then they could spread to other teams where similar types of things would be going on. And this is why the NFL is starting to change its tune. Because if we could just isolate 2 owners, Jimmy Haslam, who I would love to see thrown in the slammer for what he did for his trucking company already. I got no love for Jimmy Haslam. If you're talking about the owner of the Texans, they can't put a winning product on the field, and they obviously knew about Deshaun Watson and didn't want to play him, but at the same time, were aiding and abetting. It's not 2, it's 32. And the other 30 will do anything they can do to keep out of the limelight that way.
Yep.
So if you want to go after the owners of the NFL, I am with you. I do not like what is happening in the game. And I do a program and talk about sports. And if I had my way, football would be gone. The way that the game is being played today, I saw Hugh McElhenny. He died at 93 years of age. Football players don't die from 93, but he died at 93 because he played in a leather helmet years where they weren't taking painkillers, where they weren't taking performance-enhancing drugs, that they weren't just armored like soldiers. Nobody led with their damn head when they were wearing leather helmets. Hugh McElhenny lived 93 years. And Ferguson of the Ravens lived 26. Figure it out for yourselves. My goodness. I mean, this isn't hard to figure out. And you know, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Busby is in the position he's in because this is what he does, civil court. He gets 33% of the money. That's what that is. And it should always start at the top. It took forever to get Harvey Weinstein. You know how many people were aiding and abetting Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood?
Too many.
It was just a frightening scenario when you realized, you know, and another good example, Renee, for you is Kevin Spacey. I mean, there's a guy who is well-regarded actor, and, you know, it turns out that he was doing all kinds of grabbing people in private parts and young boys and all kinds of bad things. And when they started talking to people, they go, oh, yeah, he's been doing that for years. It's like, why? Why the silence? Why are people afraid to speak out? And the reason is because in our society, whistleblowers get punished worse than the people who commit the crimes.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So I'm with you on this. It's just, you know, to get the big guy takes time. It takes courage. And anything that gives a whistleblower who's telling the truth the courage to stay in the fight, to make sure that things change, I'm all for.
But you know, Mr. Miller, we've been taught if we were kids not to be tattletales, not to tell every little thing, you know, that kind of ordeal, you know.
Well, no, it's I don't think it's that. I think, and maybe this is just me, but if you think right now that there aren't situations that you don't know about currently way, way, way worse than Deshaun Watson and other NFL teams, I think you're crazy. Look at the plenty of examples we've seen so far throughout the history of the NFL. I mean, I've heard stories. I'm sure we've all heard stories through the grapevine of so-and-so did this, but whatever, they're so-and-so. It happens all the time. And it's the same thing when it comes to what you're talking about with like Kevin Spacey. Why didn't they say anything? Because his friends and his friends and his friends down the line are all doing the same thing. You don't hear about it because they don't want to bring everybody down. That's the reality
Bill Cosby,
of it.
When Bill Cosby was the power broker, when he had the his television hit show, and he was going to the Playboy Mansion, and he was doing his drug date thing, and people knew this. You cannot tell me that Hugh Hefner did not know about this. You cannot tell me that people around him didn't hear stories about this, but that they didn't want to take him on because he became a powerful figure. And it took time. And you know what the sad part of it is? What happens is a guy like Cosby, when he's no longer viable, when he's no longer a big name, and then this stuff finally comes home to roost and they put him away in prison. It's no different to me than when, I read just the other day, an 103-year-old man was arrested because he put people to death in a death camp.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In World War II. And they tracked him down and
they gave him like 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he got died in prison, right? But the thing is, justice would have said, why didn't we get this son of a bitch earlier? Why did it take till he was 103? Were we waiting for him to die so that this, are we just trying to bury our heads in the sand and say that the extermination of 6 million people by the Nazis never happened? Why are we so hesitant? And the answer is we wait until people are more vulnerable and weaker, and we don't piss anyone off. And then the powers that be in Hollywood can point their fingers and say, well, fuck Bill Cosby because he don't got nothing no more on us, and the hell with him. And they put him away.
Is that the same thing with R. Kelly when they gave him 30 years?
Exactly. 30 years for R. Kelly. And you got to be kidding me.
That's
Everybody knew what was going on. Why did it take this long? And the answer is he was making money for a record label. You know, there were a lot of people who were protecting themselves because, you know, there's a never-ending flow of young talent to provide for people like that. And believe me, I was in the radio business. I can tell you all about what record labels did to people, how they helped them, and how they buried them. I can tell you stories that are just, I mean, they crushed people. Yeah. And they would hang on to people who were horrible people. But the reason for it is because they need them for money. It all comes down to business. And this is where, you know, I made a pledge. I've been doing this damn show for 19 years. I'm not going to sell advertising on this program. I am a broadcast professional. I owned properties. I was on the air from the time I was 16, actually, when I technically started. I'm not going to sell myself to people because then I become beholden to them. I become no different than Rich Eisen. I become no different than Mike Florio. That when they tell me to jump, I got to jump. It's no good. As much as, I mean, and if they have to shut down the podcast about sports because they shut down sports because athletes are abusing women physically and punching them out because they're enraged and they have all kinds of problems, then shut the sport down. I got other things I can do. I got a really nice life. I love the competition of athletics, but it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be like that.
I don't mean to.
Thanks, Renee, for stopping by and giving your.
Thanks, Renee, and
that this is appreciated. Thank you. Go ahead.
I don't want to. I know we're talking about this, which is important, but I know we're coming up on the top of the hour. What do you think about the Guardians? Because right now they're kind of reminding me a little bit of the Cavs early on.
All right, we go real quick with the Guardians. The Guardians. The real question is. Watching the Twins pee their pants was really peculiar. Long before these walk-off home runs, I mean, they look like the Keystone Cops out there. In the game that we won just yesterday, it was crazy shit. I mean, when Jimenez hits the game winner, it's what preceded that. I mean, Gio Urshela does not make bogus plays when Correa dives to stop the ground ball, try to get a play at third base, and Gio Urshela is not on the bag, and the ball gets thrown away. It ties the game at 3-3 going into the ninth inning. And then in the ninth inning, your relief pitchers for like the second or third time in a row, they can't throw strikes. And they're walking guys like Sandy Leone. I mean, guys who are career 150 hitters, and they're walking them on 4 pitches. The catcher is not crossed up. He doesn't know whether to catch a ball like this or backhanded. The ball gets away from him. I mean, gets the runners in scoring position. And, and then what it comes down to is you fall behind in the count again. And why you're pitching to Jimenez, God only knows. When Franmil Reyes is on the on-deck circle, and Franmil Reyes really could not hit the broadside of a barn with his bat right now. The guy's hitting sub 200. He's striking out 50% of the times that he's at home plate. And you've got the guy who has the most after inning 7 hits for the Cleveland Guardians in Jimenez standing at the plate. You walk him. It's that simple. You don't fuck with that when you got Reyes and he'll strike out. Instead, I don't know what the manager's doing there. I got no clue, but it's crazy. They pit, and it gets down to 3-2 because he falls. He gets ahead, then he falls behind. He's got to come over the plate with the ball. And he grooves him a fastball, and the thing goes 420 feet. It's all over. And, they had hit him earlier in the game intentionally, clearly threw the ball behind him and hit him. They aimed low, but they hit him right in the thigh. And, that's why Jimenez was pissed as he came around third base and gave the put you to bed gestures. He came around ready to hit home plate. It's a meltdown.
Have you heard the Twins? Have you heard the Twins announcer when that last?
Oh God, priceless stuff.
And we've had enough.
We've had enough of the Cleveland Guardians, and we're supposed to be saying that, not them. But the fact of the matter is, and Terry Francona was gracious as he always is, saying, that's a good team we beat out there. But there's a problem. They were playing nervous Nelly baseball. They really were. And that's scary.
Mr. Muad, not to change course subject on you, but I just wanted to cover this one last basis. Does it kind of seem like a joke that Vince McMahon is how I know he's known for being a troll, and that's kind of what he does for for shock value and entertainment purposes. If none of y'all don't know that by now, it's kind of crazy if you don't, right? But he steps down as chairman. His own company is investigating him. Doesn't that seem like a sort of like a storyline? And if it is real, doesn't it seem like he's kind of making like a mockery of the situation of
Steven, come on now.
Allegedly paying a woman, to keep secrecy.
Steven, it's first of all, yes, it's real, because this is not even the half of it. I mean, Vince McMahon has 50 billion other different things that he's done that have been thrown under the rug.
Yeah, but how's his own company investigating him? Because it's his own company. Was he punish himself?
Well, here's the thing. You got to look at the motives. If you pay attention close enough, there's a couple people behind the scenes. I mean, it's not a coincidence that Stephanie McMahon decided to step away. Shane McMahon was essentially fired by his own father around the Royal Rumble time. You have Khan, I think it's Nick Khan, I want to say. Nick Khan. He's the one who's handling the business side of things. Isn't it interesting that all these people who have been connected to Vince McMahon for many years, when you look at Laurinaitis, you look at Kevin Dunn, they're all starting to fall down the little landscape here. And isn't it interesting that sitting right there coming back is Stephanie McMahon? Triple H is now coming back, being more involved. Nick Khan is now stepping into the business side of things. They're taking him out. Vince McMahon is running a dying company right now, and they know that. Vince McMahon is getting up there in age. He can't do it anymore. That's what this is.
But Mr. Moohead, make this make sense. If these allegations, how does he punish himself if he's the chairman of the company? They said they're investigating. It's his company.
He's not going to be there anymore.
Well, that's the way that happens is you get displaced, and there could be any number of ways that you displace him without getting him in trouble. For example, if you come up with anything that would indicate that from a mental perspective that he's not on his game and that he is incompetent for one reason or another, you can get him off the hook for any of these issues. You got to get him out of the position.
So it's more like his family's telling him to go away. Like, hey, look, Dad, you got to go away, or
Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt.
And before I go, I promised Derek the floor on this Big Ten Pac-12 thing.
Oh yeah.
USC, UCLA to the Big Ten. And we're not going to have a whole lot of time here, but I want you to give your basic overview, Derek.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this as quick as possible. Basically, what it comes down to is money. The Pac-12 has not been represented in a long time as far as any big-time playoff or bowl game. They've just not been there. And the world of college football is now changing. You saw Oklahoma and now Texas leaving to go join the SEC because it's all about revenue. It's about what is going to get more eyes on the product, what's going to bring in that money. So essentially what you're looking at now is, just to give you the broad picture here, there's going to be 3 super conferences. You're going to have the ACC, the Big Ten, and the SEC.
Yeah.
And all these major players are going to join those respected conferences. So UCLA and USC, first of all, USC is going to be basically how Clemson was in the last couple of years. That's going to be USC. So Buckeye fans, Michigan fans, get ready for that in the Big Ten. Second of all, this is the interesting part here is it's not just this. You're now looking at Notre Dame, or I should say the Big Ten is waiting on a decision on Notre Dame. If Notre Dame decides to leave the independents and go join the Big Ten, which if they're smart, they should, or join a conference, that's going to be a major thing as far as the revenue and the eyes on the product. And they're also Oregon and Washington is coming, and eventually you're going to see teams like Utah, possibly Colorado. This is the world of college football has changed, and this is what I'll wrap up with. The NCAA has nobody to blame but themselves. They sat on the NIL stuff for all these years, and they tried to throw it under the rug. They tried to ignore it, and it took Congress stepping in saying what you're doing is illegal. They could have had a plan in place for all of this time, but they refused, and it's the same thing here. They have refused to figure out this playoff system. They've refused to figure out how conferences and everything's going to work properly, and guess what? It's backfiring, and the NCAA is going to be essentially dead here shortly.
Well, the teams that are joining the Big Ten, it's no different than if you're building a house in a development area like where we are down here, where you're going to get paid handsomely if you sell a house here, although you can't move back in once you've gotten out. But the money is there. And any college program today, if they want to even be relevant, needs to be attached to that bigger entity. And it's the unfortunate thing, because I'm a purist when it comes to both the Olympics. I don't think pros should be allowed in the Olympics. I know I'm way an old timer on this. And college football was college football. I liked it better when talent was spread out over the entire country. And now you knew what was happening when Nick Saban starts getting all bent out of shape and pissed off about Texas A&M. You know goddamn well that nobody is going to sit idly by
with Jimbo.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing is money, money, money. And nobody wants to. And the other thing is an egotist like Saban, and make no mistake, he is an egotist, will go to any length to win. And for him to be calling he's the pot calling the kettle black. He's the guy who's been doing this shit, and it's like other people are finding ways of doing it better than he, and he's getting old. And they're bending the rules of college football, and this whole NIL thing. Everything's getting,
Won't this be a result of more parity around the league? I mean, if teams are learning how to cheat, I mean, look at Jackson State and Deion Sanders. He can recruit top prospects to come to his school.
Well,
No. I think it's just going to make it more top heavy, in my opinion, instead of more parity. I think it's just going to be the top teams are just going to keep getting richer.
We got Manning in, we brought Earls in. I mean,
let me tell you this much. I think I've said this on here before. I've had the privilege of knowing the NLI guy for Ohio State, and I've gotten to learn a lot more about it. And I can tell you this much, again, like I said earlier, the NCAA is the only person to blame, because the reason why it's the Wild West right now and it's free agency is because they didn't have a plan. NIL could work. It could have been something beneficial for everybody, but now it's turned into free agency for the entire landscape of college football. And what you said, Double P, that's exactly right, because the top heavy teams are going to have the money. Like you just said, Steven,
nobody
Texas
wants
has
to
the
give
oil
up
money.
the position. It's no different than the 32 NFL owners. Nobody wants to give up their power base. Why should they? I mean, it was easy They got a head start on everybody, and they don't want a level playing field. They were never interested in that.
Like go to the NBA, for example. The NBA is, I mean, we can sit here and argue maybe 8 or 9 teams, but I only see 2 teams that are really marketable, Lakers and Celtics. That's basically what the NBA is. And in order for them to bring in ratings, the LA brand is always going to be a marketable place where they have to, build stars. The same thing with Boston. And like those 2 cities are going to be, I mean, it's just going to be, those 2 teams are going to be mentioned for years to come, decades to come, because of what they've done, their dynasties and the players that have walked in and out of those locker rooms. So that's why LeBron James had to go there. That's why AD had to go there. And that's why they had to build the LA brand, and Boston is right along with there. And you can probably add Miami and Chicago and a couple other places, but Boston and LA is the same thing. And they don't want to give up that power. They don't want to give up that position,
But Alabama, who really wanted the University of Alabama to play Troy State in the first game of a season? What kind of a sadist would want to watch such a thing? I mean, what all of this was all about and has been about long before NIL was about, you knew that you had X number of games that were possibly competitive games, and then you would load up the rest of your opponents like Notre Dame did with the armed forces and the universities and the Navy and the Army and all of that in the Air Force, and easy wins. And you would pile up into the top 5 because you were either Notre Dame or you were in the SEC or whatever. And that's the way they got around it. Now, with a level playing field, when teams started to actually come up and be like, get players, recruit players who were top blue chip recruits, and they didn't go to Alabama, or they didn't go to Ohio State, or they didn't go to Clemson. And, and all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, this team just went 14-0 in Idaho, it's like Boise State. They were undefeated. We can't give them a national championship, even though they were the only undefeated team. Yeah. I mean, the thing that's amazing about it is that from the highest order in college football, you don't even let them into the goddamn tournament. You let Boise State rot. An undefeated team can't be in the top 4.
And Boise State went undefeated, I remember, in the mid 2000s for like 5 years straight, and they never could get above 15.
And you know something, Renee? I used to live right up the street from Furman. Furman is in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. Oh, I was up in Landrum in the foothills. Yeah, I mean, what in the hell is Clemson playing Furman for? I mean, it's just like a beatdown.
And here's the funny part. Alabama would play New Mexico State in like the last 3 games of the year. So it ensures that they don't lose any position. Oklahoma, same thing. They'll play Jackwater State and like after they're like 10-0.
Ohio State playing Akron. I mean, it's Bowling Green, Akron, Toledo. It's the same.
But again, what makes the world go round, we know. And I'm going to finish up on this.
Good discussion.
The reason that Alabama played Troy State was that Troy State was willing to take the beating for $500,000.
Bingo.
The bottom line is that program at Troy State, which at the time was moving up, they're now fully Division I, but they wanted to go from Division II to Division I, and they accepted that game knowing they were going to get blown out. But the money that they got from their standard, it was a pittance from Alabama's perspective, but $500,000 years ago for Troy State was a big to-do. Same thing with Furman. Furman's a wonderful academic school. And they have some nice athletes, basketball team over at Furman. I knew some guys who played tennis at Furman. Good school, great campus. Used to ride my bike around the campus all the time. Great place. But the fact is that if you say, hey, we're going to pay you $500,000 to get your ass kicked by Clemson. It's like that goes into the till of Furman. Furman doesn't see that kind of money coming across their table very often. So it's money that makes all of this happen, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So you have it. I'm done. We got 15 minutes of bonus Moohead, and who could ask for more than that? Thanks to Derek and Stephen.
Get a last word, everybody.
And Peter. You want the last word?
Oh, everybody gets one. You used to give each guy a last word to say.
Okay, one last word from you.
Okay. I'm going live tonight, so make sure y'all tune into my channel. Going live tonight.
Okay, a little self-pimpage. It goes a long way. Double P, one word. What's it summing up?
Just to end up on the college football thing, I just think, in my opinion, obviously a lot has to do with money, but I also think it kind of started also with the playoff system, because a lot of the other teams weren't really getting in unless they were part of the Big Ten or SEC. So I think that also kind of started this whole snowball.
All right. And Derek, your final word.
I concur with Peter. You're going to see more teams join the Big Ten, SEC, and ACC, like I said earlier. And I think a lot of people were going to be upset with the Deshaun stuff, but I just hope it ends soon. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And we live in a world of Amazon. We live in a world of box stores that have just, taken out all evidence that there is ever a Main Street and locally owned businesses. Everything now is corporately done, and there's no reason why our sports shouldn't end up the same way, because this whole thing is designed for the few and not for the many. I wish I could tell you that it was the other way around. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, to this edition of Moohead Radio. No show on the 4th of July on Monday, just because, we have some company coming here, and Roxanne's got a couple of relatives coming down here. So that she hasn't seen in years because of the pandemic. So we're going to be celebrating here. And so it'll be another week. It'll be next Friday that you'll see the next Moohead Radio show.
Next Friday.
Thanks a lot for tuning in. Have fun on the air, Stephen, and until next time.
Yeah, I'm going live tonight.
Hasta la vista,
subscribe to my channel.
Shut up. Hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.